Hi. A question that I get asked quite often is, I'm thinking about getting a new computer, which one should I get? And my usual response to that is basically to respond with another question. What do you plan to use it for? Because pretty much the answer to that question will allow you to arrive at the answer of what kind of computer you'd be better off getting. If you're a pretty much devout gamer, you'll find yourselves you'll be more than likely building your own computer and buying the bleeding edge of the technology that's out on the market. This does mean that you're going to be locked into Microsoft Windows. Some of you are going to be able to do Apple, actually get Mac OS X to run on it, but that's a pain in the ass process, and you're going to be limiting the amount of games you can play on it as well. Also, some of you will be able to get it running with Linux, but it's whether or not you can be asked with that. Some of you will not even be asked to build your own computers, but are still looking to pay top whack for the really greatest ones. I know some of you quite often will go for something like Alienware, or Dell as its owners are now. But I'd recommend against them, to be honest. You're better off having the rewarding journey, to give it an interesting title, of building your own PC. Especially if it's the bleeding edge that you're headed for, and yeah, your operating system is going to be Windows in this case. I'm afraid you're unlikely to be getting Mac OS X on there unless you're willing to hack away at it and use the various different hacks that are out there. Some of you might even be able to get Linux running and maybe some VMware for the titles that don't work in there, but for the most part, you're going to be Windows bound, I'm afraid. Sorry, Mac fanboys, but that's the way it goes. If you're like me and willing to compromise on the performance for the sweet spot in the pricing, basically drag yourself down to mid to high end, not bleeding edge. That's where the landscape begins to change. There are a lot of pre-built PCs that are perfectly capable if you can't be asked to build your own. You build your own, you're going to get a nice system for a decent price. I mean, I built my main gaming rig for about £600-700 a couple of years back, and it's only now that there's games that I can't run with it, and of course the technology has moved on and I can't really upgrade it with the latest graphics cards. So I'm facing a rebuild of my system at some point, but I can't really afford it at the moment. However, the interesting point is that when you're starting to hit the mid to high end is roughly when Apple begins to appear right on the edge of that radar, especially considering that with the success of Boot Camp. Now, Boot Camp allows you to dual boot your Mac into Windows on your actual Mac machine, be it a laptop or one of their desktops. Now, that's a point as well. If you're a gamer, forgot to mention this, if you're a gamer, I really recommend against laptops. It's always nice having the sheer portability, but because of the hardware restrictions, and also because the technology isn't, you end up paying really high prices for what would effectively be just a couple of steps down from bleeding edge, and it's not worth the money to spend on a laptop for gaming. It's not worth the hassle. Buy yourself a desktop and buy yourself a decent monitor. Go widescreen, you'll love that. Once you've tasted widescreen gaming, you don't want to return back to the old horrible resolutions. So basically, when you start getting back to what I was talking about, when you get to the mid to high range, and you can then dual boot your iMac or your Power Mac with Windows. Bear in mind, you're still going to have to pay the license fee, so that increases the cost even further. And again, people don't like to hear it, but Macs are pricey for what you get. But I mean, you do get a sleek operating system, you do get a nice and sexy machine. And I mean, the operating system for most functions on a PC, for Office kind of products, because there are open source products, and there are also Microsoft's Office itself. There's a Mac version. was almost canned by Microsoft until they realised, hang on, there's a market there. So once you move to browsing, video viewing, video making, a Mac is quite good for that. For gaming, you're probably going to want to dual boot it into Windows for being able to play your games. Again, sorry, there are some native, there are some games that do support Mac natively, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a Windows-based game. So the boot camp to allow you to dual boot, definitely something to keep in mind if you can afford it. Otherwise, you're probably going to be able to get a PC of comparable or better spec for cheaper, really. But that's only if you build your own as well. Buying the pre-made ones, you're always going to pay a bit of a premium on it regardless, or it's going to be massively underspec'd, that it's just not worth it. If all you're going to be doing is a bit of video watching, maybe even a bit of video making of your own, browsing, again, office work, gaming, if gaming isn't your thing, then one of the lower end PCs, pretty much you can guarantee anything that you buy from like, I wouldn't say PC World, some of the more reputable online retailers, you could probably get a cheaper machine that will do you perfectly fine for a bit of media, bit of document writing and things like that. It's perfectly fine for that. Also, never discount Macs. If you've got the additional cash, look at the Mac, by all means. It's you might actually find out that it'll do you. But if it's gaming you want to do, to a certain extent you might be able to get away with it with your Mac, but for the most part, for the bleeding edge, sadly it's Windows mainly. But that's the way the market has gone. You are kind of being punted that way. But bear in mind, you might want to have your computer for media and for the other web browsing and things like that. And you might want to get a console for your gaming. That way you're not having to constantly buy bleeding edge stuff. You buy your console, have it for a few years, buy the next iteration of the console. Just think about what you need to do with that machine, and that will think about what you need to do and what kind of price point, how much are you willing to spend on it. Then too will decide your machine. I hope that's been of help. If you've got any comments or if you want to check out anything, www.pissheadnerds.com. See you later.